Hi Jodhi, Sarah from the upcoming. What a pleasure to have you here tonight. How does it feel to be here at the Girls on Film Podcast Awards?
Oh, I feel really privileged to be asked. I think it's such a brilliant event. I mean, it's such a great podcast. You get to hear people talking from behind the camera, DPs, female DPs talking about how, they thought of giving up, but, they pushed on through, like, for example, the podcast about the team behind Wicked. And I think that's really inspiring to a younger generation of filmmakers who want to go behind the camera. When I was growing up and, I was talking about that, there was a culture where it was just not seen as either possible or acceptable. So I think this podcast is really important in busting that taboo.
Do you feel like, obviously we would perhaps hope in future that we wouldn't even need to be banging the drum about, representation of women, whether that's from front or behind the camera. But it feels like, although we've made progress, well, maybe still not quite there yet. So where do you think we are in that sense? And where would you hope we'd be in future?
I think, sadly, the progress has been glacial. I've seen it over the last 35 years, and it's really not changed very much. Something like 7% female directors behind the camera in the industry, something like 14% writers, I think. So, yeah, obviously that has to change, and I think change will come if people talk about it. And, yeah, I don't think you can talk about it enough. So I'm optimistic, but I think people need to sort of raise awareness about it, also about equality of pay, things like that, which don't exist for women in the industry. So just need to keep banging on the drum, I think.
And of course, your most recent role in Dune Prophecy, that's probably a really good example of a genre just being a bit busted open. It's completely female-led, alongside the likes of Olivia Williams and Emily Watson. Fantastic show. What has that experience been like for you? And do you think that is symptomatic of, in some ways, we are seeing some shifts?
I think it's a real change to have a sci-fi series fronted by two middle-aged women on a major platform. I was reading an article only the other day about a writer who was saying that she was asked to make her female lead, who was in their 50s, 20 years younger, because apparently women in their 50s aren't a valid audience for television, which, seems quite difficult to believe, given that obviously younger people are not watching television as much as my generation are. So, yeah, that obviously we're 51% of the population, so there needs to be representation of us on the screen. And I think the pen is the best way to achieve that, to actually write those roles for women is the best way for that to happen. And definitely Dune Prophecy is a great example of that, thankfully.
And looking at the nominees for tonight, I have to sort of admit I do have a favourite. The Substance was my film of the year last year. I just think of the sort of unapologetic nature of it and the fact that it is kind of playing with genre, and also Demi Moore's performance. Do you have a favourite? What was The Substance like for you?
I loved The Substance. I loved how uncompromising it was and how in your face it was. And it was funny, as well. It has a brilliant sense of humour, that film. But it really drives its point home. It doesn't compromise at all. And it's also kind of visually stunning. It was incredible, but it has a really vital message at its heart. So for me, that was an incredible film. And I was so glad that film is out there. And I think she's one of the most incredible filmmakers. It would be difficult to go through the whole list of nominations. But yeah, I think this year is a really exciting year. So yeah, I feel really, really lucky to be here.
And another one of the frontiers I feel like we've been perhaps pushing through is showing kind of female sexuality, female pleasure on screen. Things like Baby Girl or Nora, he's on the list there as kind of a good ally. Perhaps just kind of shifting that male gaze that's been sort of very prominent in cinema and TV, and kind of just showing female pleasure in a different way. Do you think that's something else that's very important?
I think the whole issue of shifting the male gaze and actually having, filmmakers being able to tell their story from the point of view of a female gaze is fundamental. Absolutely. And I think something like Baby Girl, I loved Baby Girl. I loved the fact that there was an entirely new take on something that we've seen told from a male perspective so many times. And it's such a much more, it's a refreshing way of exploring power dynamics, but also, female sexuality. So, yeah, I think we need more of that, obviously. And I take my hat off to someone like Nicole Kidman, who's championing that as well.
What's going to be next for you, and what might you have on your bucket list? Is there someone you'd love to work with? Would you like to step behind the camera one day?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things coming up, which I probably shouldn't talk about just at this stage. There is a kind of Cornish folk horror that I think has come out in the States and hopefully will be coming out here with a very talented director. That's with Emma Appleton. And yes, I mean, there are other things that I'm working on, and I would love to kind of get more involved in sort of initiatives, you know, to bring more female filmmakers' work, especially, you know, to the screen. But, you know, I think also there need to be structural changes to allow that to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed tonight. Lovely to chat to you. Thank you.